Hi, good evening and welcome to the 11th edition of Coach's Corner. It's quite refreshing to know that we have managed to carry it through for 11 sessions. And I would like to thank all of you who are present on the call today for all the support that you have been extending. My name is Aditya. I'm a life and an executive coach, specifically focused around emotional intelligence. That's one of the core competencies that I carry. By education, I'm a chartered accountant. I have about 19 years of corporate experience as a finance controller, CFO. And together with me in this journey is Kingshuk. Kingshuk, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi Aditya. Hi guests. It's a pleasure to have you. My name is Kingshuk. I'm based in Bombay. I'm also an executive coach, and I have been working with few corporates like CRISIL, S&P, CRISIL, G Capital, L&T, Tube Investments, and Fidelity, and Bharti AXA. And I just love coaching. So thank you very much, and pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Kingshuk. Thank you very much. So today we have a very interesting topic, and an interesting topic like this needed an expert who is looked upon as an authority on this particular topic. We have Dr. Bala Ramadurai. Dr. Bala has a PhD from Arizona State University, and he has a BTech from IIT Madras. He's authored a book on design thinking, and that happens to be the topic that we're going to discuss today. The book is called Karmic Design Thinking. He's got 3 patents to his credit, 10 plus publications in international research journals. He's an adjunct professor at the Symbiosis Institute of Business Management and a professor at the National Program on Technology Enhanced Learning. His teaching experience also includes creative problem solving courses at IIT Madras, IIT Gandhinagar, IIT Hyderabad, and Symbiosis and IISc in Bangalore. He was a technology forecasting researcher and designer in the Format project. And also he's a systematic innovation facilitator at Mindtree and research scientist at General Electric, GE. So those were the posts that he held in the past. He's mentored students in entrepreneurship facilitated by Carnegie Mellon University in the US and has been cited as an expert in innovation and creativity by the Harvard Business Review. So welcome, Dr. Bala.
Thanks, Aditya, for having me over. I'm very excited to be part of this journey. And of course, special thanks to CH, the person who introduced me to facilitation and coaching in the first place. So thanks for connecting us both. Great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you, Bala. So what I want to start off by asking is, what is design thinking? Okay. And can you give an example of how you have used design thinking in coaching?
Okay, excellent. That's a let's start with that question. I had that in mind. So let me start off with a small, let's say, a character sketch of Polish astronomer and mathematician by name, of course, Nicholas Copernicus. Right. So he. It is going to be a sort of analog story, so we can connect back to design thinking. So he, battled hard at the time in medieval Europe, where everyone thought that Earth was the center of the universe. So everyone thought, and no mistaking by anybody, because I don't, blame them, because when I look outside my window, I see hardly anything moving. One cloud here, one vehicle there. That's all. So that's what people in medieval Europe believed. And Copernicus found something wrong with that always. But he was a mathematician. He tried to explain things through models, the rotation of the planets, etc. Okay. And at one time, it struck him that if he inverted the model from Earth-centric to Sun-centric, suddenly the models became a lot easier to deal with and explain as well. But he was scared to admit that because everybody thought otherwise. And so it took him a lot of time. In fact, towards the end of his life, he published his work. Okay. Now, the parallel I draw with Copernicus' story is that all along we have had a product-centric approach, which worked very well for us. We believed it reaped us a great amount of returns. It did wonders. Product-centric or service-centric approach. Anything we wanted to change, we would start with the product or service, make a tweak, and send it and push it into the market. But then at some time, maybe around the 60s, 70s, people suddenly realized, hey, wait a second, this quite doesn't sound right. Maybe there's some other way to do it. And that's when somebody coined this idea of human-centric design. Suddenly the tables were turned, and people looked at the human being who's the recipient of the service or the user of the product, became the center of our attention. And suddenly everything turned on its head. Initially, of course, people are very reluctant, but now people accepted it and say that this is the way to do it. Any change at all, any product or any product you see around yourself, we want to see it from the person using the service or the product. So to me, this sort of Copernicus story for me symbolizes how the inversion has helped us and has been helping us all along in product or service design. Now to the second part of coaching, I think it's this now it's an easy question to answer, right? So coaching is so human centric too, as a by definition, that design thinking sort of fits in straight away. You look at it from their perspective. It's not about the coach. It's not about how many years of experience the coach has in what they do. It's about them. You put them in the center and see, why is this person going through such an experience? Can I figure this out? So that's the first thing. So you totally invert the model and look at it from their perspective, and suddenly things start clearing up, and we become useful as coaches. So this is what I found a parallel with Copernicus story, and I love telling stories anyway. So here it is.
And we all love hearing stories, and it's a very interesting parallel that you've brought in to from we moving away from earth centric to sun centric, towards we moving away from product or service centric to human centric. So often what happens is we see that whenever an organization approaches us as a coach or an individual approaches us as a coach, there's a stated need. But as we start digging deeper into it, there's a real need that comes through. They're usually very different. Okay. In your experience, do you have any such example where you're facilitated to help? Again, it would be better if you can give a corporate example to us, where you've helped us, you've helped them to really understand and identify the difference.
Okay. Again, let me start off with a simple analogy. Is to me the person who's seeking help. We sometimes calls them customers, not for the financial implications, but more about the user of our services or products. So in this case, it's the coachee, right? So they come with a certain a need in mind, like you said. But to me, the analogy is they are like babies, right? So babies who are less than a year old. Now, less than a year old, they cry when they are, hungry, when they are tired, when they're sleepy, when they're just plain, or they have a tummy ache, right? But it is for us parents or caretakers to figure out whether they're bored, sleepy, hungry, or they have a tummy ache, and then we prescribe a solution based on that. We try out a solution based on that analysis itself, right? So oftentimes I find that customers slash coachees, they don't really know what's happening. They know there's something wrong. They can see that things are not working out very well, or they need help. Even if it's something is not wrong, they feel the need for some outside sort of gyan, for lack of better word. So they approach, but they really don't know. They can't put their finger on what it is. So to me, it is for the coach to help them out in that respect, to say that, oh, maybe their unsaid reason is where we should be focusing on, not on the said reason. Because if we work on the said reason, the same thing happens with babies, right? You give them a pacifier, it works for 10 minutes, 15th minute the baby starts wailing, in fact even louder this time, right? So the same thing with us, coachy, for me is, uh, you shouldn't be I shouldn't be prescribing a solution based on what they tell me. It often ends in dead ends. So in a corporate example that you asked me, this was interesting. So this is a tractor manufacturer. We called up the farmers who are using our product and asked them, do you have any issues that you need bringing up? They said, well, I find this whole farming itself laborious with your tractor. I wish it were easier. So, can you be more specific? What do you mean laborious? Obviously, everything is laborious. They said, no, I really don't know. I can't put my finger on it. I don't know. So, traditionally, we sit in the design center and try to design something for our customer. Now that we have heard a complaint that, oh, we have to make them more efficient. But I said, no, 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 this can't be the case, right? We are talking about empathy and human centricity. You can't be sitting in a AC room in a design in front of a computer, particularly. So I herded these engineers to a farm, and we made them sit with the farms, drink the same water that they drink, eat the same food that they eat, and make friends with them, and took them through the entire day of how their typical day is. So we went through that, and they of course also demonstrated how they use the tractor, how they go about getting off and getting on, and all that. We make mid notes, we carefully observed what is going on, with a few questions here and there. I said, don't lead them to a solution. We are not here for solution finding. We're here for finding out how they are leading their lives on. So at one time we found that this farmer was getting off his tractor after about a ride of 60 to 80 minutes. He would get off and sort of clean the attachment at the back of the tractor, and it would take him solid 20 25 minutes, and then get back on to the tractor, right? And then continue another for 60 to 80 minutes. That was his typical thing, right? So for him this was no problem, because this was his life, this is how he led it on. These engineers noted the times and all that, and then when we went back to our design center, the problem was obvious, that it was laborious, it was time consuming, because of a step in between that nobody had told us. None of the farmer community has mentioned that, in spite of all the feedback coming in. We never heard this before. So we said, how can we fix this? In you wouldn't believe this, in an hour flat, these guys had a solution. And one more Entu guy, built a prototype and said, let's try this out here in the field. We tried it out, took it to the farmer again, and it actually saved them 20 minutes easily. And this was an easy fix for the engineer. So one of the easiest things is go there and find out what they're doing. So to me, it's easier said than done, because we're so comfortable in our setup, right? So the computer is there. I mean, even in coaches, we're comfortable with a certain setup. But for us to go and find out what's going on with our coaches, and actually seeing what they see, is a tough thing to do. Is a tough call to make. So I think design thinking has empathy in its core, and coaching really can use that bit a lot. And then of course the usual problem solving after that. So that's my experience from corporate world.
That's quite interesting. And as you were explaining that, what I was thinking is, if we were stuck with the product or the service centric approach, uh, just hearing the feedback that it is laborious, then we probably would have gone back, tried to see the seat alignment, or or some height, or focused on something which was completely irrelevant.
Yes, yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the most popular one among engineers. Okay, I'm an engineer, so I can blame my community for what we think. Is we think we reduce the cost, business just starts soaring up. So this is our standard model, and if you want a feature, take this existing feature and slap it on. So this is our that's the way we think. We put it up there, and we lived a quite a good life, engineering this way. But now we've started to see a different way. Of course, it's not only true with engineers, but I'm saying, because I can talk about engineering community, I can say this for sure, that we've been living in that, put our head under the sand and pretend that technology will solve everything for us.
Great, great. Any questions from the audience?
Hi, I had one question. When I heard of design thinking, I was actually a little curious to know why have you prefixed karmic design thinking? So I just wanted
Okay.
to you to elaborate on that.
Okay, great question. Thank you so much for that. So uh, I was designing a course for teaching design thinking to my MBA students for the first time. So I said, let's start with what they know. It's business works with ideas being implemented to in the form of a product or service which leads to revenue. So that was my idea thinking. And I said, can there be something before and after the ideas? So ideas obviously don't pop out of vacuum. They are meant to solve problems, right? So there are problems which need ideas, and they need to be tested. So between a product or a service, there's also testing, right? And before problems, whose problems are these? The question to ask is that, and the answer is people, right? So we are talking about human centricity, and I'm explaining design thinking to these students. So I said, okay, here's a neat way to do it. So people, which is empathize with them, try to find out. You saw a case also, and then you don't accept that as the problem itself, but try to analyze and see if you can figure this out, figure out what the problem really is, what is the underlying problem. Don't take as they say, but see if there's an unsaid need, the unsatisfied need. Okay, that's in the analysis. Third was to ideate or solve using your own creativity, or you could use patterns of thinking. That is something that can be done in the solve phase. And of course, build a prototype and take it back to the customers, which means you're starting to empathize again. So this seemed like a four-step method: empathize, analyze, solve, and test. So one of my students came up with an acronym for that too, EAST, East, right? So empathize, analyze, solve, and test. So this is the four-step method. So I said, can I look for case studies now? Now that it looks like a simple model, can I look for case studies? And I started digging deep into literature. I found a few which are okay. There were some case studies. But then around the same time, I was planning a trip to Ajanta Caves, which is about 250 kilometers from my home. I was planning a trip there, and I started reading about. I don't know how many of you do this, but I usually research on the place I'm going to visit and find out, so that even if the guide is rattling off something, I can say, hey, wait a second, you're saying something that I didn't read up. So I read up, and then I go visit these places. So I was reading about Ajanta caves, and I came across Lord Buddha's teachings in that. So because Buddha is the sort of central figure in the entire caves, he has talked about four noble truths as his as part of his post enlightenment. His philosophy is around four noble truths. The first one says, acknowledge that there is suffering. To me, that came close to empathize, because we acknowledge that our products are not perfect, and that products people suffer because when they use a product or service. So to me, that was mapping to acknowledge that there is suffering. The second one was, now that you know and you have accepted that there is suffering, can you dig deeper and find out the root cause of your suffering? Okay, so that's the second step. And the third truth he mentioned was, once you've figured out what is the root cause, can you actually think of ways to mitigate the suffering, or ways to put the suffering, end the suffering once and for all. So that was the third truth that he talked about. And the fourth one was, now that you've thought about ways to end the suffering, can you walk on the path to end the suffering once and for all? So to me, it mapped one on one with all the steps of design thinking. As I was thinking: empathize, acknowledge suffering, analyze, think of ways to why the suffering is there, solve, think of ways to end the suffering, and test is to walk on the path to end the suffering. We're just not talking, but we're doing something about it. Now, Lord Buddha also goes on to say that this is a ongoing process. It's a cycle of many generations. So he talks about birth and rebirth. But I was trying to translate that to our business world, how it actually, our product and service world, which is what I was interested in. Turns out that all products, no matter what we talk about, our services, they go through cycles of evolution also. So each generation, so if you take your iPhone, if iPhone 12, iPhone 1 had discovered some kind of insight, okay, so that actually carries over generation after generation. So any new truth that is uncovered by the subsequent generations are carried over till the last generation, even 12, 13, I don't know how many iPhones are going to come out, but they're going to be carried over. To me, it sounded synonymous to the karma part of how you carry over the goodness of the deeds of the first generation down to the last generation. Now, it also begs the question of what's going to happen after we reach our liberation. What is the equivalent of liberation? So for me, the example is that 25 years ago, I used to wear a Casio watch, right, to wake me up in the middle of the night, in the early mornings, or measure time. Now my phone does that. So the functionality or the need that one product generation itself was doing is moved on to another product or service itself. Although that product has attained liberation, we don't see Casio watches anymore. We see other kind of watches. That's another story. But that has sort of passed on and given it to a next set of product or generation, right? Product generations itself. Now, after the smartphone revolution sort of subsides down, it's going to transfer it to another product to service. To me, it seems like a perfect match to what's going on, and it helped me think about ways to do this. So that's why I said this is different from what Stanford and IDEO had coined when they said design thinking. This is actually very cyclical. Of course, they also talk about cyclical, but about this fact that it's carried over, in product generations and service generation. So that's why I said, okay, let me call it a flavor of design thinking called karmic design thinking. So that's my long answer for your short question. Thank you for that.
That's a great analogy you've brought in, bringing in the Four Noble Truths from Buddha and then kind of putting them into. So the wisdom has always been there. It kind of reinforces that belief that I have here.
To add to what you said, Aditya, in fact, Lord Buddha says, don't take my word for it. This is what I have observed my ancestors do. He said, this truth is very old. He was 500 BC, right? So he's saying his ancestors already came up with this. So I'm thinking it's close to how we humans behave and interact with each other. So this is sort of how we have postulated it. So to me, it sounds very close to how we humans think and interact. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah, Lord Buddha had also said that craving is the source of all suffering. So
Okay.
on a lighter note, from the customer standpoint, you should not crave for the products if you don't have suffering.
Don't stand in line for your iPhone, next iPhone.
It's a good one.
Good one.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
So in the case of that tractor and the farmer, your engineers could actually go to the field and live with the farmers and everything. But in modern day coaching, the client comes to us. How are we going to, get into their lives or, see a slice of their life from their point of view, so we can actually find out what is the root cause of their issue?
Very
How can we
interesting
translate that to a coaching in today's world?
Okay, very interesting question. I think that we have, yes, ideally sitting and with them in their field conditions, spending that time will be the best, according to me, will be the best way to know what the coachee is going through. On a day-to-day basis, you will glean a lot of insights that your coachee probably wouldn't be able to articulate or mention it out. But the next best thing is to try to simulate this. Is again my own way of looking at it is try to simulate in a form of a role play. There are many tools that we can apply for these. Again, I'm trying to apply some of the innovation tools to this. One is role play. You can flip it and see. Okay, do you if you have a problem with tight deadlines? So let's pretend that we are having a tight deadline and react it the way it is. So yes, it is artificial. It is not the exact conditions, but I am sure in simulation, in a role play, we will be able to glean something out of this information ourselves. So that's one tool that I have used in the past. The second tool that I've used, again, this comes from the innovation space. This is called it's a boring name for a really powerful tool called system operator. Okay, don't get fooled by the lameness of the name. But what it is, I don't know. I hope I can use my. Oh, okay, never mind. So imagine it's a tic tac toe. Have you play, if you have played the game tic tac toe, it's like a 3x3 grid, right?
Yeah.
So what? Imagine that on the y-axis. Okay, so y-axis is the vertical axis, right? That is the space. So imagine the center of this tic-tac-toe is the coach's current career, current state. Okay, that's where he is or she is. Okay, so that's where they are. Now the horizontal axis represents time. Okay, so the vertical axis is space, quote unquote space, and the horizontal is time and vertical is space. Now ask them the question, what were you doing 5 years ago or 10 years ago? Let's fix up a time frame. Okay, before 5 years ago, what were you doing? So we are going in this horizontal space in the tic-tac-toe previous window, and we're looking at saying what the coachee was doing 5 or 10 years ago. Okay, they will tell you, I was working for this company, I was doing this and I was doing that. They will say that. Okay, and then say, do you have any plans for the future? If they don't, leave them alone. It's okay. It's very tough to predict future. We can leave them aside. Now say, ask them, who is the recipient of your output? Okay, so the answer could be, well, I am in finance, and my chief financial officer is the recipient of my. I'm just making stuff up. So let's say they're reporting to the chief financial officer, or their customers are people who given the POs, for example. So that's their the top box, right? So all their output, they're hired because of this top box, right? Now, what skills do you have right now? What are skills that you need to fulfill this duty? You can ask them. That will be the lower window. They will tell you, I have this certification, I am a manager, so I have undertaken these trainings, this, that. They will rattle off a laundry list. That's easy to get. So now you have filled one top window. These are like, they're called 9 windows. Okay, so the top window, the middle window, which is the current scenario, and the bottom window, which tells you what skills they have. Now let's go to the past. Okay, they told you all about what they were doing. So you can ask them, what skills did you need then for what what you were doing? So they would again give you a laundry list of things that they needed back then. And again the same question of saying, who was your boss or who was your customer, and could be the top left hand side box window. So this formed 6. Now is the tricky part. Now the tricky part is the future. We don't know what's coming up. So but now with two points in time, we actually can get a good reasonable estimate of where they're going with their lives, right? So you can actually, from their skill set, you can say that this is the skill set that they had, this is the skill set that they have today. So with this, you can reasonably predict what they need for the future. If not, again, leave them alone. Let's come back to it later. Some people struggle with this. I don't know really what's happening with my industry. It's in a flux. We are going through these conditions, etc., etc. Okay, leave them alone. Okay, so if your customer was that, your customer is this today, what do you think they will be, or what do you aspire to be? This is something that they're reasonably clear about, most of them. Okay, so you can get some hints on the top right hand side box. Okay, then you can say, what role do you want to play for that customer or for that boss? Could be the next thing that they should be aspiring for. Now you can easily nail down what is the skill set that they need, what is it that they are lacking, what is the skill set that you can use from today, what is the skill set that they have today that probably will come in handy for their next role also. So this is a 9 blocker which has really, in fact, it has helped my own cause. I never dreamt of writing a book, but this was in my far right window. I had no skills to write a book back then. Okay, I didn't even think about writing a book could involve, for example, writing. Okay, so I didn't even know that what all went into writing. Okay, the skills needed. Slowly and steadily, I thought about skills that I would need. I started developing them. I started calling people a lot and finding out, picking their brains on what is writing about. And then one of them turned out and asked me, "You're asking me a lot of questions about writing. Who are you writing this for? Is it for an executive? Is it for a student? Is it for a peer like yourself?" That set me thinking, who's on the top right box? Whom am I writing it for? And I said, wait a second, the 22-year-old person is going to benefit maximum out of my book. So all in through the book, I have kept them in my mind. So that's my target customer, so to speak. And that filled the box. And I started developing skill and slowly, thinking about the whole thing. And now it's my present now. I actually wrote a book and I published it. So sort of a personal story also to how I use this in the past. It's a very powerful tool that I've seen many people use I've used it with some executives. They turned around and said it really clarified some of the stuff that we were really not sure what to use it with. These are two things that I try to do in the absence of the fact that you can't go to them. I hope that helped you, and hope you can try this out.
Yes, thank you. That was really useful. But
Okay.
I would like a visual if you have any
Yeah,
one pager or something.
sure. Why not?
I'm just getting into design thinking. I am not able to design it yet.
No, fair enough. So yeah, I'll share something with Aditya, and he can
Yeah,
probably pass it on
I'll
also.
pass it on.
I
Yeah,
have something like that for my coaches. I built one such thing.
Yeah, Aditya, I'd like
And
to have that too. Huh? If you could.
sure. I'll pass it on to everybody on the call. Yeah,
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Aditya is so kind. Yeah, okay.
you are kind. I'm just a
Thanks a lot.
okay. Any other questions that? Uh,
Yeah, can I?
yeah, Amit, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi Bala. So
Hi, Amit.
so I wanted to understand a little bit more of how design thinking could help, especially in the service sector. I think a little bit you already addressed with the last one, and any other examples of where you've seen, and especially I mean the toughest thing that you have come across, and how did you go about handling that?
Okay, great question. I used to be with Mindtree, the software services company, in way back when. Okay, and this is an interesting problem we were battling along there. Is this uh, you know the team came back and said we are very dissatisfied with the way project is going on. Okay, and they said. Can you do something about it? Because we have tried everything. This team doesn't seem to be satisfied with the way the project is run. We have tried all sorts of models and methods, and just didn't work out so well. Is what they came up and told us. So okay, let's step back a bit. That is the situation, but I'll step back a bit. I used to be part of a team called knowledge management. Okay, now knowledge management is the paramedics in a software services company. Why do I call myself a paramedic? Because they've tried everything possible, and when all hope is lost, they think the patient is no good. Is when they call the knowledge management people. So that's what our experience. So we knew they had tried everything. So we went there armed with our this defibrillator and all that, and said, okay, let's see what we can do. And so we asked a few questions around, and then realized there's something going on. What was the situation was that there was the team was not all co-located. They were all not in one geography. They were in two geographies. That's all. They were. So one was in the place where they're developing the code, and the other was near the customer location. And this is overseas, right? So they were there's an overseas team, and there was a what they call offshore team, which is in the offshore development center. They had a team there. So when that was the situation, we said, okay, now don't do anything, just write down whatever you are feeling at the moment, whatever you're feeling at the moment. That's what we want to know. Okay, so they wrote down a whole bunch of stuff, and this is not good, that is not good. So they emptied their mind. Basically, they poured their woes on pieces of paper. We gave them tons of pieces of paper. They kept writing it down, and then we collected all that. We found some of them obviously were duplicated, and we did that, and we looked at it and said, why don't we see if we can connect them all like a network? So this is what we did. Okay, so visually we put them all together, saying, then we actually figured out how they really work with, even with these. The method I'm describing is called perception mapping. For just if you want to go search up on the internet, you can look up for perception mapping. It's again a powerful tool. Even for if you're working with multiple coaches and you're wondering what's going on in a team, you can do that also. So in that they were trying to map this. Me and my colleague were trying to map this whole thing, and then we figured out that there were some of these blocks which got in a lot of attention. One of them was that the overseas team were seen as dictating the terms to the local team. That's all there was. There's nothing rocket science. But they had how is it related to design thinking? Is I wouldn't have been able to figure this out on my own if I had just asked them questions. They themselves wouldn't have come and told me this also. So we said, just pour your heart out. Okay, then it was simple. The answer is simple. The solution after that is simple. There's no design thinking required for that. They said, let's have more calls. That's all. I mean, very stupid solution to a very complicated problem. And the efficiency just shot through the roof. They had more meetings, more time friendly, where the project team and the overseas team caught on, and things were solved. Now the for us, the moral of the story really was that the emotional part of the problem is never addressed, is usually left out in the open. And in design thinking, one of the first things that we do is one is try to find out what is going on at an emotional level. So they may say something, but there's actually a fear, there's some kind of clinging on going on. What is that? And that happens only when you look at it, say label it, saying we want to find out what's going on emotionally. Okay, and the other part is of course the intellectual, which we are good at. We can if I ask you what's wrong with your phone, you would have filled out 2 full notebooks of what is all wrong with your phone, right? So that's the intellectual part and the emotional part. So in design thinking, in services primarily, I think it's important to latch on to the emotional part, in the sense of feeling what your user, what your team is going through, and also understand it from an intellectual level. So once you figure that out, that's when the next part of analysis and solution and testing, all that comes in. So to me, services, whenever we think about it, we in a large company like a Wipro or a TCS or an Infosys, they're so far removed from the end customer that they do not really see what's going on from that. But once you sow the seed of the fact that emotionally how are they feeling, can you track somehow, can you in your long chain, can you find out how each step is doing emotionally? It sort of starts making a difference for them. This is what we found out. I don't know if I addressed your question at all.
Yeah, I have a little more, couple more. Is that okay? I mean, beautiful what you said. Is that okay?
I'm fine. I'm fine with that. Yes. Yes.
Good.
Aditya, okay.
Good,
Okay.
Amit.
So, okay.
Yeah,
So,
I'll leave it to Aditya, and we can take it from there. He's the boss.
okay. So you said that, okay, now is that necessarily the first step, or you looking at the situation, try and apply different steps from design thinking on these aspects?
Okay.
That's the first one. I'll come to the next later.
Okay, so so if I understand the question right, can we go on to the next few steps and then come back to the other steps of design thinking
Yeah.
itself?
Yes.
Do we necessarily have to start with the empathy?
Yes.
I'm going to say yes. We have to start with empathy. Why? Because again, I'm an engineer. The moment I see a question, I see a problem, I come up with a solution, even if it is not the right problem to solve. So oftentimes we waste a lot, and resources are tough to come by in a company, in a startup even. I work with many startups. The moment they work on the wrong problem, and you go deep into that, it's going to be very tough for you to backtrack and come to the fact that, hey, wait a second, maybe I was working on the wrong problem. It takes a while for us to figure this out. So the design thinking is also designed in such a way that we make even if we make mistakes, we can easily quickly correct it. And so it's cyclical for that reason, that any mistakes are made, the cost benefit is the cost that you lose out because of a mistake is less based, and then you can backtrack and then come back to it. So which is why I often say start with empathy, and see if you can really mine out, is there something that's burning under, rather than working on the first problem that you see. In fact, my book starts with the first story where the student makes a big mistake in his internship. He says the boss asked him to work on, think of a customer's problem. He thinks of himself as the customer, and the first problem that pops into his mind, and the first idea he takes up and starts running with it, and it ends up being a disaster. I have faced this myself, not in such a dramatic fashion, but oftentimes I don't go deeper into the problem itself. So, and I like processes. So, process helps you focus, it gets you that focus. And designers have done this a long time in the design world, just that they weren't able to articulate that this is the process that they were following. They assumed that they were acting out of intuition, but that came out of pure experience. So right, so that's when we pulled out this process and started working.
Right. Beautiful, Bala. Thank you. So the next thing on that is, because we start with empathy, right? Now, is there anything in design thinking to provide a safe space so that people actually, come out with that, right? That's a key when the whole thing, is dependent on that. Now, how do you do that?
Okay. The moment I mention empathy and customer interaction to my MBA class, they go to forms.google.com and start generating a survey and send it to thousands of people. And they'll give me colorful charts on 50% think this is great, 70% think that is not good. And they start immediately working on this. So they think this is empathy. And I don't blame them, because it's very efficient to do it that way, right? Customer interaction can be that way. uh, to me, empathy is a very messy process. I mean, we're all coaches here, we know how human to human interaction works. We never say what we really think. Oftentimes we often refer to different things and we have to infer lots of stuff, right? So empathy really starts off with giving more than receiving. So in interviews and observations that we have, interactions with our customers, we try to make friends with them, we try to give out information, we don't make it like a sales sort of thing. So the moment they get that vibe, they're going to shut off and they're not going to reveal, they're not going to show their the soft portions of where they're suffering and all that. That's never going to come. You're going to still work on a very high level and you're going to make mistakes. So first and foremost is to show that you're a human being trying to help another human being. That's all the motive is. The profit and the company and all that is way behind. So this is a tricky thing for us when I represent companies and go to the field. Moment they see an ID or a card that we show, the farmers or whoever the customers they're like, oh, this guy is trying to make money out of me. I'm not going to say anything. They're just going to shut out. They're going to give you a share, show, let them let you do whatever they want, but they're not going to reveal what they really feel. So that's going to be a really tricky thing for us to do, is to make friends with them, get to know them at a very very and I can go on. There have been certain uh, product features that have come out only because we had a good relationship with the customer, not because of any other thing, not because of our prowess, not because of our experience, not because of our supply chain or any such thing, but only because purely because of the relationship we've had with the customers. So I think again, for blokes like me where empathy doesn't come naturally, I follow a process, and that helps me in figuring out, okay, this is what they're going through. We have a tool called customer journey mapping. This is often used in design thinking. It's a story. It's actually storyboarding. So it's a you put the day in the life of your customer as a story, and as if you attach a camera to your customer, and you go feel understand and feel what they're feeling. So that's how we latch on to at least we try to latch on to their empathy part of the whole thing. Did I answer your question, Amit?
Yeah, you answered this and you even preempted another one, because I wanted to, because you said you're a process guy. I want to know what is that process you use. You already told that. So thank you, Bala.
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Bala, in fact, what you just said resonates with me, because I used to work for a company where we used to actually involve our customers in the product development process.
Nice.
So
Okay.
where we knew that the guy who's going to use it is also going to be involved in the entire process. We had these, the kind of guys called the KOLs, key opinion leaders and stuff like that.
Okay.
So right from the idea initiation stage, you got them to ideate the ideas. You got them to get involved in the working on the product and feeding it back to us. And then we had our prototypes go back and forth. And then we had the final product. So end of the product was made, and then we had these guys as the cheerleaders for that. So I think so that was the entire loop that we used to do, and it worked out very well. I'm talking the medical devices industry,
nice.
in Johnson and Johnson and all that we used to do it. So it was actually interesting, what you spoke just now. I could relate back to some of the things that we used to follow.
Oh, so cool. Okay.
Okay. Any more questions?
So, Dr. Bala, I had a question. Kingshuk here.
Please, Kingshuk.
Yeah, my question is, empathy is a big factor in the first conversation with a potential client. Okay. How do I show empathy while being worried about signing up with the client?
Oh, wow. Deeply philosophical question. I can take it as a philosophical question, because I think that I'm going to try to answer it in two different ways. One is, in my experience, whenever I've helped somebody without expecting anything in return, is when things have worked out very well for me. Okay. So I feel that the moment we start thinking about, oh, am I going to sign up with this guy, or am I wasting my time, I often end up with my attention diverted into two, and I'm not helping him neither, and it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So then it doesn't happen. The signing also doesn't happen so well. To me, that's the first part, where in this whole idea of empathy and helping people, and that for me is important, because that's the way our society. So that's the second part of how I was try to get to your question, is how we have built our society. Is that and this could be socialist or capitalist. I don't really worry about which philosophy it is, but the way we have built our societies are that I am great at helping somebody else, and that carries on. So you can refer to a speech by Professor Matt Ridley from Oxford. He used to be a professor at Oxford, where he said, any product, if you take it, is never built by, we think, oh, this is a mouse made by X company, or this keyboard is made by Y company. But it's actually, if you look at it, who made the coffee, which is drunk by the people who are drilling the oil, who supplied it to somebody else. So we actually are not, this product came as a result of people going connect. This is all the connectedness of all that. So one to another, to one to another, it just keeps going. That that empathy sort of flows from one starting point to another, and it's fascinating how many thousands of people go into making a simple product, what we consider simple product, like a mouse or a keyboard, right? So he talks about that very beautifully. So to me, the analogy, the extension of that is that when we are great at trying to visualize what other people are going through and helping them out. So why don't we fully utilize that? And then if they're happy, they'll turn around, and maybe if it doesn't work out this time, the signing up doesn't work out this time, I can pretty sure bet that this whole arc circle is going to come back to us and say, hey, yeah, what you told me the other day make perfect sense. I realized it not then, but 6 months later, and maybe they will sign up with you. Okay, so I'm trying to say that on the one hand, we want to help the client in full honesty, in full sincerity, and when we do that without expecting in return, we get bang for the buck, so to speak. And the interconnectedness of that also is going to help us out in the long run. So I don't know if I answered your question, or was it too meta that I didn't get to it?
I think it's absolutely right. It's absolutely right. I think
Thank you.
it really makes sense to
And I quite connect
sense.
with the fact that when we are trying to help somebody, it has to come in with full sincerity and honesty. Because if something is lacking there, the recipient can easily figure it out. They can
Yes.
easily make it out.
Yes.
So that would probably be more detrimental than really helping us out. So at the end of it, if the customer doesn't sign up, it's okay. But then at least we probably would have built a solid reputation of being honest and truthful. So that's a great response actually.
Thank you. Thank you.
Aditya, can I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
a question?
Go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Bala. This is Seema.
Hi, Seema.
So you mentioned that empathy is something that may not come naturally to you, and therefore a process has kind of helps you in the direction. So over the years, I wanted to ask you whether that has shifted for you. Are you in a position today to naturally feel empathy without the support of a process, or has something shifted for you in terms of your ability for empathy?
Okay, I'd like to think so. Okay, so yes, so I felt that I was lacking in empathy, particularly when I got the signals from people around me. So when I realized that there are things that I took for granted, for particularly when our baby was born. I used to go to work in Bangalore traffic and all that. Used to go very early, return very late, and I wondered why my wife was so sort of not connecting with me, not conversing with me like before. I just couldn't really see what is going on. Then I said, wait a second, let's just try to switch it back on with this customer journey map and see what she's going through on a daily basis. I think it was a holiday and I could see what she was doing. And then I realized that, man, this life is really tough that she's going through. Maybe I should talk to her about this. And then the solution was easier once I saw it from that side. But tools like these, more I started using it, started being helpful. And when I also asked my students and my clients to use it, I saw some of them turn back and said, this actually made a big difference to me. Particularly one tool, again, another process that really helped was we at the day-long workshop, at the end of the day, I asked them to do a mini skit of what the customer is going through. Okay, so it's fun for me because I like watching plays and all that. So I asked the students to do it, or my corporate people do it. Morning they do customer journey mapping, which is the tool I talked about in the empathy journey, right? In the afternoon they did the play, and a few of my students, and this started becoming a pattern later on, they told me that in the morning, yes, I did feel empathy and we found out what is going on, but when I acted the part of this person, I really felt like what an 80-year-old is going through in an airport security checking scenario. That's one of the scenarios I gave them. And I said, that's true. That is really true. And from then on, I said, this skit thing is going to be so. Role play we already talked about. When we pretend, even we know that we are pretending, brings that naturally. And the more you do it, again, like any other skill we've learned in the past, I think empathy is also a skill that one can learn and practice. So to me, I think of it as a muscle. I believe I should ask my wife if I'm better off now, but I believe I'm better than I was, say, maybe a decade ago.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
The skit is a very powerful idea because, and I quite resonate with what you're saying in terms of when somebody actually even tries to enact it, they have to have some emotional connect with
Yes.
what the end person is going through, and that helps build the empathy muscle. Before we go to the next question, I would just like to share my screen and talk about our next week's guest. And I'd like to thank Seema for helping me um, uh, get get him on board. So, Mr. CN Murthy will be our next week's guest. He's got over 2,000 hours of coaching experience, and he's a past president of ICF in Mumbai. I hope everybody can see my screen. Cool. So he's got a BTech from IIT Kharagpur and has over 4 decades of rich corporate experience. So he would be there with us talking about consciousness and how we can use that in coaching. All right. So I'll stop the share and back here. Any more questions? I can ask a question. I mean, if there isn't any. So, Bala, one of the challenging things that most of the coaches find is that when a client, when we work with a client and try to help the client see the importance of breaking an old habit and coming up with a new habit, while the client may, during the conversation, may probably have said, okay, fine, this is a great thing, and I would like to continue doing this on a go forward basis. But how do they stick to it? How do they stick to that habit? Because that's the only hour we spend with them, or the only time we spend with them when they're back in their environment. They may fall back onto the old habits. How do you go about doing that?
Okay. I guess I'll speak more from my own experience. I've come across this method called chain of habits. So habit is never isolated on its own, right? So this habit is preceded and followed up by another habit. So if you look at our typical day, so this goes back to our customer journey map also. If a typical day is actually a chain of habits strung together, many of these we do in an autopilot fashion. They say, I don't know what the exact number they quote, but it's upward of 60 or 70% of our day is on autopilot, right? So considering that, to actually break a habit and introduce a new one is very energy intensive. Think about driving or bicycling. My god, it was scary initially, right? So it was a completely new thing with new environment. Everything is new, we don't know what's going to happen, right? So considering that, it's going to be really tricky for us to even think about such things. So personally, okay, let me give you, I don't know if it is an example that is relatable to what you're saying. Is I wanted to, again, going back to my writing, right? So I wanted to write, but once the day kicked in, it was really difficult for me to find a pocket of time where I could focus on writing stuff. So I just couldn't get that time. So I just said, okay, maybe next week I'll start, next week it never happened. So I said, okay, let me not do this. Let me just tie it with something that I already have. Is I said, okay, I wake up at X hour, so let's say 6 o'clock. Can I turn the clock back 5:50 to 5:55 and that 5 minutes I'm going to write. Okay, so that's in a sense that I have all my habits. Can I attach it to the start? It's like an engine of a train, right? So I'm going to do that. So can this work? So I said, let me try it for one day. If it works, let's see if I can do it the second day also. So 5 minutes didn't seem to my brain like a big thing, right? So I did wake up at that 5:55, and I wrote one sentence, and that was it. So then I went about the normal day, and for 2 or 3 days it sort of started working very well. I liked how it was. In fact, I ended up typing more than just 5 minutes. Even though I got about 5:55, I would sort of delay the next habit a bit, right? So I started doing that, and I said, can I experiment with 50 and 45 and 40? At some time I started waking up at 4:30. I had an hour and a half solid in the morning, and I would get a solid chunk of writing done. 500 to 1,000 words would just flow by my finger, through my fingers. It was fascinating how from 6 a.m. waker I moved to 4:30, and it is just wonderful. For me, that experience is wonderful. And I did finish my book. I wrote another manuscript, this time a fiction one, and of course it's sitting there. I will have to now piece it together and start sending it around. But yes, that's to me that the fact that little changes and carry it along, or what Seinfeld called the crossing the X's, right? He said, take a calendar and mark X when you've done the habit. So you keep doing that, you have a chain of habits, and then 21 days later it becomes a permanent habit. So I tried with these. I don't know if that will help these clients of yours, but for me it was really helpful. I could succeed in waking up very early. I never thought I could.
And that's a great way to cheat your brain, actually. So you induce
5
you to
minutes.
5 minutes.
5 minutes is all it takes.
It's a great one. All right. I'm conscious of everybody's time. We are 3 minutes over. If in case there are any further questions, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, we can end the session right now.
Bala, fantastic, examples and everything, and really enriching. And thank you, Aditya, for having me over here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amit. Thanks for joining.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Aditya. This is fun. I wish this. I mean, on one hand, pandemic times has put out in us in our separate places, and we've been able to only interact with the screen. But it's given us wonderful opportunity to interact with people all over at the same time.
Yeah.
Without batting. If I had suggested this 2 years ago, we were saying, how do we communicate with so many people at the same time? Nobody would have said the answer was Zoom. Anyway, thank you so much, Aditya, for inviting, and Kinshuk also for co-hosting. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you
Fun.
so much. Thank you, Amit. Thank you, Priya, Jasbir. Really appreciate you coming.